Give us spirits that are willing to hear your words of encouragement, correction, and strengthening this time. Fill us, Father, with your words today. Illuminate them by your Holy Spirit. And give us peace and strength and joy in you. We say your prayer. Amen. I'd like to talk today about a hunger. A kind of a hunger that God tells us is a blessed hunger. I'm not so sure if we usually think of hunger in that kind of way. Has anybody ever in here been hungry for food or thirsty for water?
Yeah.
Very hungry or very thirsty. Maybe you haven't eaten for some time because of, might be different kinds of reasons. But if you've ever had that experience of being very hungry and not wanting to be very hungry, you'll know that it has a way of occupying your mind. And it has a way of focusing your thoughts. And it has a way of being behind kind of what you're doing. If you have fasted for a whole day, you'll know what I mean. It's never far from your mind, this kind of, somehow it's kind of in the background, and you decide partly what you're going to be doing on that day based on food, or maybe on water. If we're very hungry and if we're very thirsty, did you know that sometimes parts of ourselves can come out that we haven't recognized before? I can become a little irritable if I'm hungry or if I'm very thirsty. If you're very hungry or very thirsty, you can behave in ways that are surprising. And it's not very common that we would ever think of hunger or of thirst as a place of blessing. What kinds of things are you hungry for now, if it's not food, if it's not water, if your physical needs are satisfied? What sorts of things might you be hungry for now? Be hungry for a better workplace, maybe. Or maybe you're hungry for a better job, or just a job at all. Or maybe you're thirsty for some people around you who understand you, maybe even in your own family. Maybe you're hungry for respect or for love by those close to you. Or thirsty for something that you're not even sure what it is. What am I hungry for? What am I thirsty for? There's a kind of hunger and a kind of a thirst that is a kind of blessing. Jesus tells us this. It's very surprising. And you're going to recognize this very soon, but I want to sort of explore this by asking us, what is it like to be hungry not for food? What is it like to be hungry not for water, not for respect or love or recognition or a better job or more money or a better car or children that behave better or a spouse that loves me or a spouse? These are all things that people might be hungry for. But let me ask you, what is it like to be hungry for justice? What is that like to be hungry for justice? I can tell you maybe what it's not like. Do you know that if you have always been treated fairly in your whole life, and you have always seen other people treated fairly in your whole life, you will not know what it is to have a hunger for justice. Do you agree? Because you've always been around just treatment and fair treatment. And you will know what it is to have a hunger for justice. Because everybody that's around you has always been treated fairly and justly, and you've been treated fairly and justly. So you have no need for justice. There's no hunger for that. Let me give you another example. Suppose you are treated unfairly, and maybe this happens in a family. Perhaps you and your siblings have gotten into a fight. and you can't decide on what the right outcome is. So you decide, well, we can't do this to ourselves, so we'll go to our mother or to our father. And your mother or your father or both are very fair people. And they very quickly and wisely resolve this dispute within the family among your siblings. And justice is served, and everybody knows this. If that's what's happened, the children won't be hungry for justice anymore, because the desires for justice have been satisfied. So, that can happen in our own lives also, as adults. If we feel that somebody has wronged us, and we take this to the appropriate authorities or to the appropriate person who's in charge of this, and we say, somebody has behaved here in a manner that is unjust, and we get a quick and fair and just response to that, and the situation is immediately resolved, we won't have a hunger for justice, because the desires for justice, the demands for justice, the needs for justice will be satisfied. We are going to be hungry for justice only if justice is a long time coming, or if it has been denied. Then we will begin to understand what it is to be hungry for fairness, for justice. If justice is a long time coming, or it has been denied. Don't know whether a few of you might have seen the news reports, maybe a half year or a year ago, about a young woman in Pakistan who had a terrible experience that unfortunately some parts of Pakistan and India you will hear making the news from time to time. That she was gang raped. And the case, her particular case, didn't end there, it began there. Because it was a case in which there was very little controversy about who her assailants were. And there was very little controversy that this happened. But when this case came to the lower courts, for reasons that even in Pakistan were very surprising and were based on technicalities and very bad judgments by the judges, dismissed the charges against the assailants. So this woman took this case higher to an appellate court. And the appellate court also dismissed the charges. So this woman took this case up to the highest court in Pakistan, from which there is no higher appeal. And a judge sitting on the highest court in the entire country of Pakistan reviewed all of the details of this case one more time. There was a lot of publicity associated with this case by this point. And he looked at all of these details one more time, and I guess in the Pakistani legal system there was one judge who had the deciding voice in determining a final verdict for this woman. And his verdict was that the assailants were innocent. So this woman, who had suffered a fate worse than death in her culture, spent years looking for justice in the legal system in Pakistan, only to have it denied at the last and final step. And do you know what she said? She said, it doesn't matter. I will never stop looking for justice. I will never stop waiting for justice. This woman is somebody who knows what it is to hunger, to deeply hunger for justice. This woman is somebody who was terribly wronged, and in a way, you could say she was extremely unlucky. What if a different judge had heard her case somewhere along that legal system? It's not only that what happened to her was terrible, it's also all the more terrible to have that continually being dismissed until an entire legal system seems to be mocking this woman's fame. What was it like for her to think that justice is just around the corner week after week, month after month, year after year? Would have been extremely difficult. And then the final verdict would look like the entire country is turning its back on what happened. This looks like the results of something so bad, what happened to her, this combination of events looks like something so bad that you might almost wonder it's as though a curse had been placed upon her, a very dreadful and powerful curse. Almost. Terrible. And here is the very, very, very big surprise. Because, see, this woman, you could tell from the news reports, even about how she was describing this event, that she had not allowed bitterness to consume her. I don't know how that happened. I don't know whether she was a believer. I don't know whether she was an unusually noble person of unusual character. I don't know anything about this woman. I just know that you could tell from the way that she was talking about these news reports that she had not allowed bitterness to consume her, and she was persistent in a hunger for justice that had not yet come. She was persistent in desiring uprightness in that country's court system, in that country's judges. She was consistent and persistent in doing that. Do you know what she was doing in that way? And this is such a surprise. Is because she behaved in that way. Did you know that Jesus calls her blessed? Because Jesus says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And did you know that justice is a very important part of righteousness? Justice is a very important part of what it means to be upright. That woman was hungering for uprightness among those country's judges. And that hunger, I don't think to this day has been satisfied. I don't think to this day. And that woman, who is probably still in Pakistan, as far as I know, hungering for justice, Jesus says she's blessed. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Why? Because one day they will be filled. Because one day that desire is going to be complete. How is this possible? How is it possible for a woman in her position? How is it possible for Jesus to call her blessed in Matthew 5, verse 6 in the Sermon on the Mount, among the Beatitudes? We all know this verse. How is this possible? I think there's a deep mystery in this verse. Here are some things that God has laid on my heart about how maybe this is possible for a situation like this to be a place of blessing. Because that's what Jesus is saying. Because, you know, to those who have deeply hungered and thirsted, did you know that food and water are very sweet when it comes? Did you know that if you are really hungry, you appreciate food in a way you never did before? Did you know that if you are so thirsty, a simple glass of cold water looks so wonderful? You know, I spent some time in the Southeast Asia country inside, well, it doesn't matter where I was, but I spent about 2 weeks eating mostly rice and a little bit of meat, which is fine. Most people in the world, that's how they eat. But for me, I wasn't aware how much I was missing salt until I came out of that environment and somebody gave me a Pringles potato chip, just one. And when I ate that potato chip, my mouth, it was like there were fireworks exploding inside my mouth because it was crispy and it was crunchy and it was salty. And my mouth just exploded in joy. I mean, this is not an advertisement for Pringles potato chips. But this is just to say that I hadn't had salt and crunchiness for so long that when I had it, I will never forget how that potato chip tasted ever in my life. Nothing has ever tasted like it before or since. Ever. It was so wonderful. And it was like, for the first, I was like, this is really what a wonderful potato chip tastes like, just one. If you're really hungry for something, you have a very deep appreciation of it in a way that makes you blessed when it comes. in a way that makes you blessed. Did you know I had an experience of that Pringles potato chip that I think very few people have? Very few people understand how wonderful it is to have something crunchy and crispy and salty after you haven't had it for weeks and weeks and you've been used to that kind of thing before. I don't know whether any of you has been ever really very thirsty. So thirsty that your tongue is parched and your throat is running dry and you have a hard time swallowing. But if you've been that thirsty, what does a cup of cold water look like when it goes down your throat? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. It is so refreshing. It feels heavenly. It's like a cup of cold water. How wonderful. It looks better than the best gourmet meal possible. If you're really very hungry and thirsty, did you know that when that hunger and thirst is supplied, that you have parts of you that become joyful that you didn't even know existed? Parts of you become alive and joyful that you didn't even know were around. And you know, when you have wanted justice for a long time, I think the same thing happens when it comes. And look at this. Jesus is not saying, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness if they are filled. Notice that it doesn't say if. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness because they will be filled. This is not any question. He doesn't say when. But that's not important. There's something else about being hungry and thirsty that those of us who have fasted are going to recognize maybe. You know that when you're hungry and thirsty and those things that are natural that you should have are not there, did you know this can become a time of purification? We become aware of things inside ourselves, sometimes as individuals, sometimes as a group of people. We become aware of things that can be purified. We become aware, for my own, sometimes it's easy for me to be, I have a headache if I haven't eaten and drunk, and it's easy for me to be kind of grumpy. People around me could tell you that probably. And there are other things that happen when you haven't eaten or drunk for a long time, and you realize, there's this and there's that.